crowd. In my mind, it was an awkward place for Prabhupada to be coming. There were so many books that had been distributed there, and it was auspicious in that regard, but there were, in ISKCON terminology, there were demons there also. So Prabhupada got off the plane, and I'm thinking, I've got to protect Prabhupada. Who knows? One of these crazy guys here could run up and throw something at him, or who knows what, because they had done things like that to his disciples. And so I was standing next to Prabhupada, kind of protecting him from the crowd in my mind, and we were walking towards the door to go out onto the curb, and the access kind of funneled down, and then to go through the door, only one person could go through, and here I was like preoccupied with this idea that I'm going to protect Prabhupada and get him through the door safely, and Prabhupada just went like this left arm, when I was standing on his left side. Next thing I can remember, I was at the back of the crowd, everybody's in front of me, and Prabhupada was in the car, and the boys were ushering him off to the temple. And it was very mystical to me, because I thought, here I was thinking, I'm protecting the spiritual master, and he's showing me I'm protected by Krishna, and I can protect you also.
In Chicago, the airport there is called O'Hare International Airport, and it's spelled O-H-A-R-E. So Prabhupada told his leading book distributor, Tripurari Maharaj, go to the airport manager and tell them that they should rename the airport O Hari Krishna International Airport. And this was an airport in which our book distributors were so aggressively distributing books that every day there was confrontation between the guards at the airport and the book distributors. So the management of that airport hated us. And still Prabhupada made his best book distributor go to the manager, and Tripurari Maharaj went there and said to him very seriously, you should rename your airport O Hari Krishna International Airport. Why did Prabhupada do this? Was he trying to have fun with his disciple? Prabhupada, he took every possible opportunity to somehow push forward the idea of Krishna consciousness. His idea was that everything belonged to Krishna. Everything. He saw everything as really meant to be glorifying Krishna.
In order to help prepare for Prabhupada's arrival, Govardhan, president of Detroit, and the brahmacharis went ahead to Chicago to help fix the temple up a little bit. We had a real crack cleaning crew for Detroit. Govardhan hated dirt. The Detroit temple was always spotless. It had white floors, white staircases. So we came there, and I remember the doors flying open in the vans, floor machines coming out, and everybody got to work and scrubbed the place down, made it really clean. We built a little desk and a seat for Prabhupada. This desk was a sheet of plywood and some 4x4s. I built it. They had a room for Prabhupada, very simple room, just a bed, chair, desk. He lived very, very simply there. I got to wait outside of Srila Prabhupada's door because I was his bodyguard. And every time Prabhupada came out the door, not offer my obeisance, his foot would come down right by my face, right? And then it would go, and I thought, I wanted to get the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee, because we had just started that Guru Puja program every morning a few months before that, and we were praying the lotus feet of the spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and attain the mercy of Krishna. So I thought, I need those lotus feet. I have to have those lotus feet on my head. But being near Prabhupada was quite an intimidating experience. So they asked to have initiations. They brought us into the room. And I was in such a state, I didn't know what he was saying or what I was doing, but I was just very conscientious that I was with a pure devotee of the Lord. As a matter of fact, when I walked into the room, and this was the only time I was probably alone with Srila Prabhupada, I walked in the room, I offered my obeisances, and when I stood up, his eyes were like fixed right on my eyes. And just for a second, I looked into his eyes, and the most incredible thing that ever happened to me with another human being occurred at that moment, in that I had this overwhelming realization that he knew everything about me. And I felt so shameful. I felt like I do not deserve to be in the room with this personality. And there was also, there's no sense in trying to be pretentious, because he knows anyways. So don't try to pretend to be something that you're not. But those eyes, it wasn't like looking at me like you are such a fallen soul. But it was this look of infinite compassion. And almost like he understood my suffering. And all of this happened just like in a megasecond. And then I couldn't look any longer, and I looked down. But I knew, you must bare your soul to the spiritual master. There's no sense in trying to pretend, because you can't cheat the Mahabhagavad. So then Prabhupada gave me the Gayatri Mantra, and then he said, so, are you chanting your 16 rounds? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, and are you preaching Krishna consciousness? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, I'm a Sankirtan devotee. I go out on book distribution every day. And then he said, always preach Krishna consciousness. And I said, thank you, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, okay. And then I said, I had to muster up all the courage that I had within my being, because I was thinking of those lotus feet. And they were just sitting on the Vyasa, and Prabhupada had his dhoti pulled up to his knees, and his feet were right there. And I said, Srila Prabhupada? And he said, yes. I said, Srila Prabhupada, could I touch your lotus feet? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, that is not necessary. And I went, Jai Srila Prabhupada, I offer my obeisance. I went out, I felt so stupid. I couldn't believe I asked that question. It was so trite, So I went out and I told Sir and Vaish was there and Pragosh, and they all cracked up and they said, Uda, you are such a nerd. Can't believe you did that.
The first temple in Chicago was on Halsted Street. It was a storefront, and that was run by first Rudra Das and his wife, and then later Bhakulasva. That temple closed. At that time I was temple president in Cleveland, and Bhagavan decided to centralize his zone, so he closed the temple in Chicago and pulled all the different leaders back to Detroit for meetings to try to determine how things would be managed. And I kept saying, how can we neglect Chicago? Chicago is the biggest city in the zone. We can't close Chicago. And then one day Bhagavan just slammed his fist down and said, damn it, Govinda, just go to Chicago! So we went with a couple of brahmacharis, and then we were collecting and doing some preaching, and then the traveling rock group was kind of disbanded by Prabhupada, and they came to Chicago. So we had a lot more people there, and searching around we came upon this former YMCA building.
We were in the old YMCA. Actually, it was the old black YMCA from segregated times. And it was a rather rundown building when we got it. We'd done a lot of renovations. So one of the main things we did that year was totally redo the gymnasium into a beautiful big temple room with side balconies and a huge altar and everything. And actually, Sri Govinda was the inspiration behind the aesthetics of it, and I had organized the work. And when Prabhupada arrived, it first sat in the Vyasasana there and looked at it all, which for the time I think devotees will remember was quite gorgeous. Srila Prabhupada said, only devotees could do this.
There's a special darshan Prabhupada gave us just the library party in Chicago with Satsu Maharaj. It's when we had first started the work in America, and we were eager to tell Prabhupada about the success, but we were mostly wanting to hear from Prabhupada
how he wanted us to proceed. It was a whole new experience, getting these academics to take the books. So we came in with pens and paper and all ready to take lots of instructions from Prabhupada. And we shared with what we had done so far, asked for guidance, and Srila Prabhupada just simply said, you do your best, and Krishna will help you. And that was it. And at first we were stunned, we were waiting for him to say more. And then we realized, oh, this is a message. So Prabhupada's letting us know that he wants it to be done, and that if we just try to do our best, Krishna will give us the intelligence what to do, and how to do it. There's a message that stuck with me for a long time. When I'm dealing with complex situations, I realize that it doesn't really have to be approached in such a complex way, that somehow if we can just do our best, then Krishna will compensate.
So during the Guru Puja, I remember some brahmacharis, they had developed a kind of boogieing, doing rock dancing. This was going on during Guru Puja. And all of a sudden, Prabhupada, like a conductor, like a maestro, he just stopped the Guru Puja cold, in an instant. And then we're all kind of frozen in place. And then Prabhupada gestures to the picture of the Panchatattva in the distance, of how their arms are upraised. And he says, dance like Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we're all corrected, because we're all getting into disco dancing, twisting and boogaloo, and shingling, and whatever.
The first time that I ever saw Prabhupada was in the morning. He was sitting on the Vyasa-san at the Chicago temple. He was giving a lecture about how we all want to see God, but we can't even see the little piece of God, the soul. Otherwise, why would we be crying when some relative has died? And if we haven't seen a piece of God, how can we think that we can see God? I was standing right near the Vyasa-san, maybe 2 feet away, and fanning Prabhupada with a peacock feather fan all during the lecture. And I was simultaneously very happy and very disappointed. I was very happy because I realized that hearing Prabhupada there on the Vyasa-san was no different than hearing a tape recording of him. All that time I'd been listening to Prabhupada lectures on tapes, I'd been with him, hearing him, and I felt so happy and so satisfied. But I had wanted something different. I hadn't wanted it to be just the same as a tape recording. I had wanted to get to know Prabhupada the person. A few hours later, my father, my husband, and I went into Prabhupada's room. And right before Srila Prabhupada was speaking to a reporter, which is what you're seeing here, he was very much joking, very congenial, very relaxed. Right after the reporters left, then my father, my husband, and I were introduced. At that point, Prabhupada leaned back on the cushion, and he had one of his legs up, and his dhoti was such that you could see his calves and his lotus feet. And I remember thinking how soft his skin was. It looked like a skin of a baby. And as the conversation began to unfold, I realized that here Krishna was fulfilling my desire to get to see Prabhupada as an individual person. When I was listening to him on the Vyasa-san, I was seeing him as the guru, as the acharya, and here I was seeing him as Prabhupada, the individual person. It was very, very sweet. This was the first time also that my father had met Srila Prabhupada. My father had been coming to the temple periodically since I joined. First he introduced himself, but Prabhupada thought that my husband was my father's son. And then he understood that it was the daughter. He said, "Do you have any sons?" My father said, "No, only daughters." Prabhupada said, "Oh, only daughters." And then my father said, "I'm coming to this temple not because I want to see Krishna, but because I want to see my daughter and my son-in-law. Is that all right?" Prabhupada said, "Yes, they are loving Krishna." And I was thinking, I don't love Krishna. He said chanting and dancing are symptoms of loving Krishna. And they are loving Krishna, and you are loving them. So 2 things that are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. Then my father said, "But I'm a Jew, and is it really all right that I come to the temple even though I'm Jewish? Prabhupada said, yes, there can be many planes going through Chicago, but they have to know they are going through Chicago. Otherwise, what is the meaning of many planes? So there can be many religions, but they have to know what is the goal. The goal is to know God and to love Him. If you know that the goal is to know God and to love Him, then there can be many religions. After we walked out, my father turned to me and said, now I know why you've come to this Hare Krishna movement. That is a genuine holy man.
After the Radha-Damodar party, I went to the BBT library party, and we had the good fortune to have a darshan with Srila Prabhupada in Chicago. Mostly, of course, Satsrupa Maharaj, Mahabodhi, Ganesham. They had many points that they were taking up with Srila Prabhupada. I was kind of sitting on the edge of things. But I had one question in my mind, and I waited for my chance. And then when there was a little lull, I raised my hand and Prabhupada called on me. My concern was often the professors wanted to know if these books will tell us about the ancient technology of Vedic India. Because at that time, a book had come out by Erich von Däniken called Chariot of the Gods. And there was reference in there to the Mahabharata, Puranas, that they were Vimanas or airplanes or flying saucers, or whatever they were, described in these ancient Sanskrit texts. So I wanted to hear Prabhupada, what he would say about this. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, many times the professors I meet, they ask me about Vedic technology. And Prabhupada hardly let those words get out of my mouth before he rapped the table with his knuckles. And he just said very shortly, Vedic technology means Sri Guru Parampara. And that's all he said. But it was such a profound statement for me. It was an immediate instruction because, of course, I was asking the question impelled by all kinds of speculations going on in my mind. I had actually read that book, Chariot of the Gods, just to, find out more what these professors were talking about. So, my mind had been drifting in orbit. And Prabhupada just brought me right down to earth. Vedic technology means Sri Guru Parampara, and I meditated on that. That's been a very important sutra in my life since that time. One thing is that you think about technology in the modern sense, and it's the motive force behind this Western civilization and the culture that is associated with that, which has really covered the earth. So technology is the dynamic force of civilization. We know that the Vedic civilization once covered the earth. India was once in the position that America is in now, as being the leading country that all other countries emulated. And how it got to that position was because of following Sri Guru Parampara. And that is the key to how, again, Vedic culture can spread all over the world and become synonymous with civilization. See, now when people think of civilization, they look to America or they look to Western Europe. They think that's where civilization is. But actually, real civilization is Vedic civilization. And the key to that is Sri Guru Parampara, as Prabhupada said.
We went to Chicago to take Prabhupada darshan and have his association again. He immediately recognized us. He says, "Oh, I see you before in Detroit." And we told Prabhupada, we are very thankful. You have remembered us. We are fallen souls. We have no qualifications. And then again there was a gathering with the devotees. There was one question that we said, "Prabhupada, where do we serve you best?" So Prabhupada says, you can become Krishna conscious anywhere. But then immediately he said, sun is the most brightest in India. What that means to me is that I can be more Krishna conscious and better way in India comparison to any other place. And then Prabhupada also said at that time that you have a good Krishna conscious background and also good material education, so you should give this Krishna conscious knowledge in an educational, institutional manner. So we were meditating how to do it. He told us twice in Chicago, as well as last time he came, that is my exact memory, in 1976 in Los Angeles. Said, I told you in Chicago to start educational institution. But we were not in a position immediately at that time to come to India. So we started little educational place, a Sunday school for the children of Indian origin. And we had 60 children coming to our place. And we were educating them in Krishna consciousness. So today we are running Bhaktivedanta Raj Vidyalaya. So it's an educational institution, as Prabhupada said. And we have 300 children studying, boys and girls. And it's a residential school. Krishna consciousness is taught from Mangala-arati till Bhagavatam class, like any other our temple program. And these are all karmic parents' children. These are not devotee children. As it is said in Ishopanishad, Slok 11, that you can learn this Krishna consciousness and material education side by side. And also in 9th chapter, Raj Vidya Raj Guhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyakshavagamam Dharmam Susukam Kartum Avyayam. In purport, Prabhupada says there are all kinds of educational institutions all over the world, but there is no Krishna conscious educational institution or university. So according to that authority of Shastra, Sadhu and Guru, whatever this Bhaktivedanta Raj Vidyalaya English school is doing is conformed with Prabhupada instruction and his writings.
I remember the kirtans were very ecstatic. At this time there's several hundred devotees there. And they were doing Guru Puja. And everyone was dancing in ecstasy, but there was this lane. Prabhupada always kept an open lane between the men and the women so that he had a perfect direct view towards the deities. So sometimes when the kirtan started to become very ecstatic, the devotees started to dance into the middle lane. And Prabhupada started to wave his hand, move out of the way. I love my devotees, but I want to see my Lord. So I oftentimes go to temples and there's Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasasana and devotees are dancing, blocking the view of Prabhupada to the deities. We should always understand that Prabhupada is with us and we shouldn't commit Guru Aparad by putting our back either to Prabhupada or blocking Prabhupada's vision to Radha and Krishna.
Prabhupada had traveled to Chicago with Brahmananda on the airplane, and Brahmananda was reading Time magazine, and the Time magazine feature article was crime, why and what to do. So Prabhupada got inspired by the idea that we could help to solve the crime problems in America with our program. So when he arrived in Chicago, he asked us to arrange for him to meet some people in the government so he could talk to them about this idea. So he met with the mayor of Evanston, and he met with some police lieutenant. I think Mosley was his name, I remember that. Then there was this old abandoned school in Chicago, in Evanston actually, north of Chicago, and Prabhupada asked us to propose to the government that they give us that school and help us fix it up, to take in prisoners from the penal system and give them a program where we would feed them prasadam and engage them in kirtan and, some other things during the day, but a kind of rehabilitation program based on Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada was serious about it. He wanted me to go to the mayor of Evanston and propose this, and I did. And the mayor was friendly, but he said that that was the building that they had in mind for their new city hall. So he didn't think it was likely that he could get the council to approve it for our proposed purpose. I pursued it a little bit. We found some other properties that we looked at, but we couldn't get anyone to donate any facility, and we didn't have the money to buy any place, so we kind of had to drop the idea.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
We're all waiting for Prabhupada to come to the carts on State Street. Finally, Srila Prabhupada rides up in a Volkswagen, gets out, and without any hesitation just bows down on the filthy street in front of Lord Jagannath. And that really struck me, because I had been thinking in my mind, I'm not going to bow down in this street. But Prabhupada didn't hesitate, he just bowed down right there in front of Lord Jagannath. And then he gets on the cart, and Prabhupada is riding on the cart below, and myself and a few others are riding up top, and we have the blissful engagement of throwing flowers and bags of prasadam, might have been peanuts and raisins, something like that, off into the throng as we're going down State Street toward the Civic Center. Then it occurred to me that Srila Prabhupada has come to Chicago now, and this is 81 years after the first Indian Swami had come to America, and that was Vivekananda, the famous Vivekananda who came and was preaching Daridra Narayan philosophy. At that time, Vivekananda, who had been invited by clergy for the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, he was saying, what is all this talk of God? I see so many gods loitering before me in the street. Daridra Narayan, poor Narayan, in other words, everybody's God. Mayavad. So finally, 81 years later, here's a pure devotee, a Vaishnava, come to Chicago, and I was thinking in my mind, I wonder what Srila Prabhupada is going to say when he gets to the Civic Center, because this is very historic, actually. Finally, the Vaishnava, Siddhanta, is coming to Chicago after all these years. So we get to Civic Center, and there aren't that many people there, surprisingly, as I remember it. But without hesitation, as soon as Srila Prabhupada took the microphone, he said, in the Vedanta Sutra, it is said, Janma yasya yataha. The absolute truth is that from whom everything emanates. So he was establishing that everything comes from a person. So I was really smiling. I bet Srila Prabhupada was thinking of this. So that was wonderful.
When Prabhupada arrived, there was actually 2 newspaper articles that came out about the devotees. One of them was very favorable, but it didn't mention Hare Krishna too often. And the other article was highly unfavorable. It was very critical and sarcastic of the devotees. It was written actually by a Chicago columnist who won a Pulitzer Prize. His name was Mike Royko. Royko was known for his biting cynicism. He wrote this article, but practically every other sentence he was mentioning Hare Krishna. He had even parts of the Hare Krishna mantra within the article. And Prabhupada said, this man is chanting Hare Krishna. And he was much more appreciative of the critical article because it mentioned Hare Krishna more than he was of the favorable article.
Our little crew of armed guards drove in a car behind him. And on the way to the airport, Prabhupada's car pulled off. Had to use the bathroom at a gas station. And there was a fruit stand near there. So, well, brahmacharis didn't have any money. We begged some fruit. And when we got to the airport, Prabhupada had a lounge, a special lounge set aside. So, Sudama was cutting up the fruit, giving some to Prabhupada, distributing it to the devotees. And then Kirtananda Maharaj came and brought some sweets from New Vrindavan for Prabhupada. Prabhupada didn't like them very much. And while we were waiting for the flight, Prabhupada laid down on one of the benches there to take a little nap, and Jagadish was reading out loud from the Bhagavatam. Jagadish had a particular voice which would cure insomnia in any situation. So everybody immediately fell asleep. And Jagadish stopped reading and looked up, and Prabhupada lifted his head up and said, "I am listening." So he continued reading.
I was accompanying Prabhupada as his typist, and we'd flown in from Hawaii, and we stopped in Chicago and San Francisco. On one of the flights, I was sitting next to Prabhupada, and he said, "Vaikuntanath, may I borrow your Bhagavad Gita?" And I gave him my Bhagavad Gita, which of course was his Bhagavad Gita. And he opened it up and began to read it. But he took note of the fact that I had had it hard-bound in India, and at that time there was a gold embosser who would print the devotee's name on the cover. So it had a big Vaikuntanath and Saradia, which came out much larger than I had expected. And I remember Prabhupada sort of took note of my name and Saradia's name on the cover, but didn't say anything, and began to read. And I remember I was a little embarrassed. I said, "What is my name doing on there? That's Prabhupada's book." and Prabhupada sat there and read his Bhagavad Gita for some time, and then went back to chanting japa. Prabhupada would either read or chant, or maybe talk a little on the airplane. But mostly he was just absorbed in chanting.
We were traveling with Srila Prabhupada, and of course on the flight we were trying to get some shots, as you see here. The most memorable part of that trip was getting off the plane. I was walking behind Srila Prabhupada, going from the plane to the terminal. You could hear the kirtan, but you couldn't see the devotees till we came around the bend, and then saw, literally, devotee upon devotees stacked on top of each other. Big, beaming smiles on devotees' faces, but that's all you could see. You couldn't see beyond that. It was a solid wall of devotees. What an arrival.
When Prabhupada arrived in San Francisco for the Rath Yatra festival, I remember that all the devotees were extremely excited. And so they were running and dashing down the concourses, and there was a huge crowd of devotees. And I remember Tulsidas turned around and yelled at us all that, "When you act dignified, we're in an airport, behave yourselves." Then, when Prabhupada came, I remember there was a big array of sannyasis that were surrounding Srila Prabhupada, and all the devotees were chanting and kirtan. And me and a godbrother named Sridhar Prabhu, he was one of the original Vijay raiders on Radha Damodar party, very Brahmanically minded. And so he was standing with me, and he was thinking, is there any hope that we will be able to get close to Srila Prabhupada at all? Look at the hundreds of devotees, what is our chance? And all of a sudden, we got out of the terminal building, and Srila Prabhupada was standing on the walk of the sidewalk waiting for the car to come by to pick him up. And somehow or another, we were jostled and shoved by the crowd, and all of a sudden we were right there, me and Sridhar, practically behind Srila Prabhupada's shoes. So I was like gasping for breath, and we offered obeisances at his feet, and I asked Sridhar, I said, should I touch them? What would happen if I touched Srila Prabhupada's foot? I thought. And I reached my index finger forward very gingerly, and I touched the back of his shoe. And I pulled it away like it was going to be electric shock or something like that. Such a shy boy. Wasn't even 18 at the time. I didn't even disturb him. He didn't even look at me or didn't even notice it. We were just so scared. It was the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada.
The Rath Yatra seemed like it had gone downhill because
my first Rath Yatra was 1970, which was the first one with 3 huge chariots, and that was a huge festival. And then 71 became smaller, and 72 it was smaller, and 73 it was still smaller, and Srila Prabhupada hadn't come. And then in April of 1974, I was sent to San Francisco to serve as the temple president. And at that time, Madhavisa had come to get a new visa for Australia. And of course, Jayananda was in San Francisco. And Madhavisa was very encouraging to expand the Rath Yatra, turn it into a wonderful festival with a fair-like atmosphere, a real chance to broaden the preaching of Krishna consciousness. So he was a big inspiration. And of course, Jayananda was there and was very eager to do the practical work. Due to those two people's inspiration, we started trying to visualize how Rath Yatra could be expanded and improved, and how we could get Srila Prabhupada to come back again. So we got the idea to make not just the parade, but to have a fair at the end of the parade where we'd exhibit all aspects of Krishna consciousness, from deity worship and prasadam and books. Also try to turn the festival into something that was economically viable, not just a huge expenditure, and try to find ways to promote the Rath Yatra to the public in new ways. I hired a professional public relations firm, a man named Reed Turner, and I think we paid $2,000 to him to help promote and publicize the Rath Yatra. Maybe that was the best thing I ever did, because the amount of publicity this man got for free through public service radio and donations of billboards and donations of space on all the trains and buses, it was just phenomenal. But as a result that year, a huge amount of people came to the festival. Of course, Srila Prabhupada came. He wasn't in the United States hardly at all in those years, coming once a year for a few weeks touring. So most of the disciples hardly got to see him. So I'll never forget, in 74, roughly 1,000 disciples came from all over the United States to greet Srila Prabhupada. I remember on the morning of the Rath Yatra, it was cold, and it was damp, and it was foggy. And we got out to the Golden Gate Park, and it was nobody there. And my heart was pounding, and my head was spinning. I'm thinking, Lord, we've spent all this money and this huge effort to make this a nice festival, and now you're giving us this miserable weather. And I remember Srila Prabhupada arriving, and when he got on the chariot, he sat on Subhadra's chariot, and when he touched the Vyasasan, that moment the sun burst out, and all the fog was gone, and all of a sudden thousands of people, it's like they came out of the trees and the bushes, and this ecstatic kirtan started. It was so miraculous, just like an effulgence came off of him that dissipated the darkness.
And this Krishna consciousness movement is meant for educating people in this great science. So, we have published already about 20 books, 400 pages each, to elaborate the science of Krishna consciousness. So, the scientists, the philosophers, they can also understand by reading our books.
In San Francisco, when Bhaktidas was president up there, he organized a special worship program for Prabhupada to raise funds. It was auctioned off. These different services, like bathing his feet with milk or water or honey. Temple presidents could bid, and whoever bid the most got to do that service for Prabhupada, and at the end all the money would be given to Prabhupada as a donation. So at that time I had a little bit of money from an inheritance, small inheritance. And one especially I wanted to win was bathing his feet with honey, because I thought that one would take longer, so I would be able to get more time serving Prabhupada, touching his feet, than the other substances. So I won that one, and while I was pouring the honey over Prabhupada's feet and trying to stretch it out as long as possible, and Prabhupada said, hurry up. So I had to go faster. Prabhupada wasn't enjoying being worshipped as we might think that we would enjoy being worshipped and we'd like to drag it out as long as possible, but he was doing it as a service.
Prabhupada was riding on Subhadru's cart, and I was riding on the cart behind him, Balaram's cart, and my duty was to lower the canopy when we came under low bridges. It was all designed by Jayananda, and then raise it back up again. And it took like 3 or 4 guys to do it. So at one point we were riding along in the parade. There was no bridges coming or anything. And Prabhupada was on the cart in front of me. He was looking out over the thousands of people that had come for the parade. And it was all quite a scene. And at one point I felt that Prabhupada was looking at me. Even though he was so far away, I somehow there felt that he was looking directly at me. And when that happened, I felt that he could see not only my person, but he could see directly into my soul. He could see everything about me, my desires, whatever there was to see in my soul. And I could even feel that he could see that I had stashed some ladus in my coat pocket that I was wearing, that I had stolen from the prasadam bin that they had for the festival. And at that moment, I actually waved to him with my right hand, and Prabhupada immediately waved back as if to confirm that yes, I'm seeing you, I'm looking. Prabhupada had that way of communicating. Even though we were so far away, he could reciprocate in such a positive way.
This was in Berkeley. It was right around the time of the Rath Yatra. And we were all sitting in Prabhupada's room, and Bhardraj pulled a copy of Teachings of Lord Chaitanya off of the shelf, and he said, Prabhupada, usually we see Lord Chaitanya depicted as having very long hair. And Prabhupada said, yes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was hippie. So he said, yes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was hippie. And everyone just really started to laugh because he was just detecting the mentality of the question. And he said, therefore he has come to save you. He was hippie, so he has come to save you. But because of his Bengali accent, it was difficult to understand whether he was saying save you, the slightly SH in Bengali pronunciation. So people were thinking, well, is he saying save you or is he saying shave you? And so Prabhupada immediately picked up on that, and he said, yes, he has come to save you and shave you. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to save you and shave you. And he kept repeating it. It was so funny.
Lord Jagannath is the Lord of the universe, as his name means. Rathayatra is about dragging him off his throne. Sometimes the ropes that pull the chariot are compared to the hearts of the gopis, because he's being pulled by their affection and the affection of the inhabitants of Vrindavan from his lordly status in Dwarka, where he appears four-handed and so forth, down to become accessible to the common people. They can't get any more common than cowherds, villagers, unsophisticated, uneducated people. So they're dragging him down off the throne, and in doing so, they're making him accessible to the common people. And Jagannath is becoming accessible during the Rathayatra. You can't go in unless you're of a certain birth, and besides that, you can't go and touch him and serve him directly. But during the Rathayatra, anyone can serve him. Even ordinary people will sometimes be brought up onto the cart and allowed to embrace Balaram or Jagannath. So it's very much the case that Prabhupada, as an inhabitant of Vrindavan, was bringing the Lord of the universe out beyond the wildest expectations. I mean, even the people of Jagannath Puri, who acknowledge, just as his day to come out and give association of the people, couldn't imagine that he would appear on the other side of the ocean, giving darshan to people who didn't even know what it was about. And as you can see in the film, so many people came, so many common people from all over San Francisco used to gather in those days, and just wondering, probably just wondering how this is all happening to me. why this is happening. So unassuming. Why me? I don't know, but I have to honor it. It's happening. That was his mood. This whole mood of the Western success was celebrating the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur taking hold unexpectedly in this foreign land. Sridhar Maharaj once told us that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur on more than one occasion expressed a desire to spend a decade in America preaching. This was before America became the prominent country in the world, before World War II, when England was still the prominent country. And therefore he sent emissary to England. But he had apparently a vision that America would become the most dominant country in the world, and he had a desire for going and spending 10 years to preach in America. And after telling us that, Sridhar Maharaj said, and through Swami Maharaj, your Prabhupada, he got 10 years plus 2. 12 years I consider Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur lived in him. What could be a greater tribute to how well one has served their guru than that?
Srila Prabhupada sat on Subhadra's cart, and so I walked beside that cart because I wanted to have Srila Prabhupada's darshan as much as possible. And he was so happy and radiant. And partway along the route, he raised up his hand and stopped the procession for a short time. And thousands of people stopped just because Srila Prabhupada raised his right hand.
Prabhupada at a certain point indicated that he had to go relieve himself. And so they simply stopped the cart, and he got down and began to walk into the forest. Which, of course, in India, that's what anyone would do. And so the devotees thought it was some kind of ceremony, so they all started following him. Like dozens of devotees started marching, and Prabhupada just laughed, turned around, laughed, and held his hand and said, no, you all stay here.
And then when he was ready to go again, he made a gesture with his right hand, like onward, forward, and all of a sudden all the carts started moving again. Thousands of people just started moving. It was so wonderful. It was the most wonderful feeling to be just anywhere near Srila Prabhupada.
My friend Vatsara, he came to visit me in San Francisco, and we started going to different spiritual communities. By this time, I had kind of accepted this spiritual master, Swami Satchidananda, I didn't really know that much about him, but I read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and I said, geez, I need a spiritual master. But I didn't really think of the author of that Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada, the old one, the blue Vishnu on the cover. So anyway, we went to this group and that group, and he said, well, let's go to Hare Krishna's. And I said, oh, I've been there, because I had been there for a Sunday feast, and the guy was kind of a yogi and this and that, and the devotees are running around here and there. I said, it's a little bit, it's running around too much for me. So you go ahead. So he went, and he spent the whole day there, and he came back, and he talked about, God, I went there, I met this guy, the garbage man. He was just so far out. He told me all this stuff, and he was just going on and on and on. And it turns out that was Jayananda. He spent the whole day with Jayananda, emptying the garbage and going here and going there. So he said they're having, another program in the evening, and so I said, okay, I'll go with you. And so we went, and that was it. The next day, we went out and bought cloth for dhotis and cloth for saris and beads, and by the time we got back home, we had decided we're going to shave up, and so we shaved up, and we shaved up the kids, and then we showed up at the temple the next day. I said, what are you doing? You can't do that. Anyway, we said, here we are, we're doing it.